Hi, I'm Elizabeth.
And I'm Cindy.
And we're here with another Feeding Frenzy for the 4 Spiritual Laws of Prosperity by Edwin Gaines, a simple guide to unlimited abundance. We're still taking care of ourselves. We are on day number 11 of chapter 8.
Right.
Caring for ourselves and being in integrity. And what are we doing?
Welcome change.
We are welcoming change. How hard is that for you to do?
I think I'm pretty good at it. I have to admit that it's always a little uncomfortable. I think it is for everybody. I think some of us handle it better than others. And I think some of us are set in our ways more than we realize, too. And I think, I was talking to somebody the other day about web stuff, and they were saying everything's going to videos, right? And I said, well, it depends. People my age and older, we prefer to read it usually, because that's the way we learn. And we didn't have videos when we were growing up to watch, and we had TV, but we didn't have VCRs and video cameras. We did, but you couldn't afford them half the time.
Right.
So we didn't grow up with that, and I think as much as I've tried to get into that change, it's still hard for me. If I have the choice of reading something or watching a video, I'll read it every time, because I learn quicker. I can go at my own speed where I have to wait on the video, for them to get to the point I want. If I need to skip ahead in the book, I can, and I think that most people my age and older are like that. We prefer it one way or the other. I think I used to hear a lot of people complain about the kids nowadays always being on video games, and I didn't really have a problem with that because I'm a computer person anyway, and I let my kids play it way more than most people thought they should. But now I see the benefits of both ways, and my kids are now getting their degrees in the computer stuff. So I think, well, maybe that helped. That I don't know, but I think sometimes we're too set in our changes, and we say they shouldn't do this, and people are saying all the kids are on their phones and they're all texting, but that's the wave of their future, and they are socializing, even though it may not look like it.
Yeah. They
are, and I don't think we need to be so hard on the younger generations about what they're doing, because that's their future. Our parents were hard on us about what we were doing with the loud music and the.
Well, I was just thinking, it's defunct now, but in our generations came music television.
Yeah.
That was on all the time.
Right.
And the big boom boxes.
Yeah.
Your early Walkmans, and everybody had one, and that kind of thing. And
Right. So I don't know. I just think that when we call it good, it has to be good.
Yes.
As she says. And that, if we call what our kids are doing good, then it has to be good. And we shouldn't harp on them so much about, well, that's not the way we did it. well, so what? That's the way they do it. And they were born knowing so much more than we knew. That's just the way
we had advanced to a point where they know more, but we knew more than our parents.
Exactly. So
and our parents knew more than their parents. And it's the way change happens. But I think rather than a generational change, how do you deal with change in your own life?
Right.
And are you better at some change than you are other change?
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's hard to see when a change comes along. For instance, if you lose a job, or you have to change jobs, or whatever. It's hard to see in that moment how this can be a good thing sometimes. But I think if we were to look at it with an open mind and with the bigger picture in mind, that change is inevitable, and that it's our attitude toward the change that makes it good or bad.
Well, I have known personally, please don't be upset if I share this, but there have been several job interviews that you went on, and you think, yeah, it's a shoe-in, I've got this, and then you come away and they don't call or whatever. I know that was a change you weren't expecting, but I applaud you being able to look at it and say, okay, well, then that just wasn't mine to do.
Right.
And I know that when that first started happening, you weren't able to look at it that way, but as it kept happening, you were able to.
Yeah.
And I know it's, especially when it rubs up against ego, change becomes
Can be
very
hard.
difficult because
Right.
then we have to look at what part of me am I counting on this being the same.
Right. Well, and I think a lot of that comes with following your guidance too. Because before I started going on those interviews, I said, "Okay, God, if it's mine to do, I'll know it. And if it's not, then please don't let me get it." You know.
Yeah.
And trusting that guidance is hard
Yeah.
because it hits the ego, and you're like,
But I was
But I
qualified for that,
yeah,
and
but
I
I
thought that
should've
was
got
shooing,
that,
and I
right.
should have gotten that. And yeah.
But looking back, hindsight is always 20/20. But looking back, I'm so thankful I didn't get any one of those because now at this point, my life would be in a totally different direction.
It would. It would. It would have narrowed where you could have gone.
Yeah, and I'm thankful for where I've gone and for where it's led me and for where I've been led. You know.
I think personally, if I don't have some part of my ego wrapped up in the change, I can make the change.
Yeah.
Really easy.
There you go.
And let it go, and it's no big deal, and I can just, think, yeah, that is good, and I can call it good. The closer it comes tied into my ego, the harder it is for me to change, because then that requires me to change too.
Right. Well, you know what I think, especially when it comes to talking about the job interviews and stuff, is a lot of how upset we get and how we handle things comes from how personally we take things.
Yes. Yes.
And for instance, I didn't get most of those jobs, and I took it personally, especially early on. It was like, oh my God, they don't like me. Whatever, I'm not smart enough. And I start beating myself up.
Mm-hmm.
When, if we look at things objectively, it's like, okay, either someone came and was a better fit, or I just wasn't the fit that they needed.
Or
for
that would have
job.
steered you away from where you wanted to be.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So, we look at it objectively. It doesn't have anything to do with about me personally, 99% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's about what I could provide as a service, or maybe I was overqualified, or maybe, they were looking for somebody who's just going to do exactly what they say, and that is not me,
Mm-hmm.
So it's just, I think a lot of it comes from how personally we take it. I think that's where a lot of our drama comes from anyway, on all things, is how personally do we take this. 9 times out of 10, it ain't about us at all.
Mm-hmm.
It is, people don't think about us near as much as we think they do.
Mm-hmm.
And just coming off that presentation, I could take a whole lot of stuff personally and be just upset, but I
Right.
choose not
But
to,
you
because
choose
they
not
weren't
to.
thinking about me. They were thinking about how hungry they were, or how tired they were, or whatever.
It didn't have anything to do
It didn't have anything to do with me. They didn't want to be there. They did want to be there, and they were expecting something different. It just didn't matter. It wasn't about me. It might have been about some of the content, but it wasn't about me.
But I also know that you spoke very clearly and hit several very profoundly. So those people were absolutely supposed to be there.
Right. Right. So
Even if you're just there for a few, it's the reason why you're there.
Right. And I think as long as we're following our guidance and we're listening to our guidance and we're wanting to listen to Spirit, then it might be for one person. One person may show up. Or, I think when we truly ask to be led, we have to trust that that's what's happening. And sometimes the results of that are not fun.
Mm-hmm.
I know when I had my house in Tennessee, and it came to a point where I knew deep down I wasn't supposed to be there. But that was hard. That was hard change for me because I loved that house. At one point, that was my pride and joy. It answered a lot of questions for me, and it provided my family with a place that we loved. And when it came time for that to be over, it was hard to say, oh my gosh, God, let whatever happen needs to happen, but that's hard to come to terms with sometimes.
Change is hard sometimes. And it is hard, especially in the midst of the change, to be able, it takes a lot of courage to be able to say, this has to be good. Even in the pain of the change, it has to be good.
Right.
But I also know that my thoughts are creative, and as soon as I say something good is coming out of this, and I'm going to see it, even if I have to look behind me to see it,
Right.
I'm going to see the good in it. So I place a lot of my faith on there's good here, and I know that there's good here, and I know one day I will see it,
Right.
even if I don't now. I'm going to go through it,
Right.
whatever it is, even though it's hard.
Yeah. I think one of the hardest lessons for me to come to terms with in this lifetime is that that things happen and I can't always see the good at first. And that there will be disappointments in life. There just will be. Things that doesn't, a lot of it has to do with my judgments. A lot of it has to do with our social judgments as a whole. And how we judge things as bad or good.
Right. Right.
And it amazes me that in some cultures, what we judge bad in this culture, they judge as okay, And so it really all comes down to our inner self and what we think about and respond to or react to things. Our reaction is our reality. And when we can learn to respond instead of react, and we can learn to guide it the way we want to
Well,
guide
then we can start guiding the change rather than being victims
right.
of the change. And I think a lot of that, when we become awake to the fact that we have a card in this, we have a dog in the fight, so to speak, we have a role in our own lives. Once we awaken to that, then we can be able to guide the change. And we realize I was never victim to it.
Right.
Yes, it's happening now and happening to me, but it's happening for me.
Right.
Because this is where I want to get. And I can't get. There's changes I have to make in me and in my surroundings in order to get from A to B.
Right. Exactly.
So once we awaken to the fact that we can guide that change from getting from A to B, then I think change becomes easier because then we start working with it.
Right.
Rather than against it.
Exactly.
So then change becomes easier.
Yep, I agree. But I think if we're not stepping out of our comfort zone on a regular basis,
On
we're
a
not
regular
growing.
basis, yes.
And
That's the thing.
stepping out of your comfort zone requires change. You can't step out of your comfort zone and stay the same too. So I think we need.
Well, but see, too, we can change. We can stay the same. We can choose not to participate, but the things around us are still going to change.
Right.
So even though we choose to stay where I'm at, everything around us is going to change. Just like you were talking about technology earlier. There are some who just decide, forget about it. I know people who still will not get a cell phone, period. That's okay. Everything else around them is still changing, and they're still going to have to adapt where they're at to stay where they're at. So even though they remain the same, or it seems like they remain where they're at, they still have to adapt where they are in order to remain there.
That's true.
Do you see what I'm saying? So there is no staying where you're at. You're constantly changing, even if you're having to change to stay in the same spot.
Right.
It's still. So to me, it's, if I'm going to have to change anyway, I might as well move forward.
Right.
I might as well get a little closer to that goal.
Well, and I also think everything is energy, and it takes more energy to fight the change than it does just to adapt to it and go with it. So if we want to stay in the flow, then we need to just accept and adapt to the change. I can stand
in one place and create a dam, but it takes a whole lot of energy to make that water go around me than it is to just lay down in it and go with the flow. It takes a lot more energy to stay where I'm at than it is to just allow the change to happen and work with it.
Right. So we need to make changes and accept changes. Welcome change is the way she says it. She says it's
so how do you welcome a change?
I think the older I get, the easier it gets. But I think I look for changes because I don't want to get bored for one thing. But I think I welcome them by anticipating them and looking for how can I change? How can I grow? How can I step out of my comfort zone now? Now that I'm comfortable here, how do I step out next? I've gotten comfortable with certain things in my business, and to make my business grow, what do I need to step into next? So I think that's one way to welcome change is to invite it in and say, okay, I'm comfortable now. I don't want to stay comfortable. I want to keep stepping out of the comfort zone.
Always looking for that next right action step that we can take to move with it.
Right. And every time we grow, we then grow into a comfort zone too.
Into the next level, whatever that level is. Yeah.
So she says, today think of a recent change in your life that has upset you or thrown you off balance and try to look at it in a new light. So can you think of one that's thrown you off balance? We talked a little bit about my job hunting. What about you?
Well, my biggest one has been my relationship with my son. That one really threw me for a loop. And going in the quest to seek knowledge for myself, attending, one of those church services, I was given a new way to think about it. As am I holding him back by holding on to the reins of what I feel like are my responsibilities in his life? Or am I allowing him the freedom to do the changing he needs to do and the changing I need to do by letting go? So I've been looking at that one differently. And I look at it differently every day. I still have an emotional attachment there that brings up new things, and I constantly have to keep looking at it objectively, trying to step out of the emotion and look at it as this isn't to hurt you, it's to help both of you.
Right.
And he has things that he has to do, and I have things that I have to do. And sometimes that, almost becomes like magnets that are facing the same way. It becomes a rebounding rather than a connection.
Good point.
So I feel like right now we are both magnets that are facing the same direction, and we're rebounding off of each other rather than making that connection. And I think that at some point when he does what he needs to do and makes his turnaround, and I do what I need to do and make mine, then we will come back to that point of attraction. But right now it's a repelling, and being able to see that,
what that means?
helps me. Being able to see that helps me take the emotion out.
You know what that means?
What does that mean?
Too much alike.
Well, yeah, I could have told you that. And there's some upsetting factors in that too for me, because I see some things in him that I don't like, and I think, okay, then what is it in me that I am not liking? So I'm using it as as a catalyst to change myself as well. So
Good.
I think I constantly
That's a
have
good
to
lead
look
in.
at things differently in order to grow from them.
Yes. Oh, yeah, definitely. We have to keep an open mind. So we can't grow. That leads into tomorrow, which is letting go.
And you know what? Sometimes that's good stuff.
It is good stuff.
Shrink.